All right, as of this point, I have an app that is mostly done. Everything in here has been from the PLTW page. It literally shows you how to build all of this stuff. And the app works except for the timer. That's the last part that it doesn't really show you. It kind of wants you to use how you use this score ticking up to do the opposite, to make a timer tick down. So let's take that in mind and let's make this timer work. So we're going to kind of use this as a starting point, this whole like set the global score to get the current global score +1, and then notice how not only does it have to like do that behind the scenes where it makes your score go up, but it also has to update your label on screen to show the score counting up, for example. So you have your variable counting whenever the germ touches the white blood cell, and then it updates that little score label text on the screen to whatever the current score is. So let's do the same thing now for the timer to work. So the first thing that we should do is we're going to go down to our little clock thing that we have down here. So at some point we've added this clock to our components and we have this option down here. So I'm going to click that, and then at the very top we're just going to use when clock 1 timer. So this is basically, well, gotta refresh my screen here. This is going to be the overall handler to make this clock function. So I'll get back in here real quick. All right. So clock 1. If we look back at this whole global score +1 thing, we're going to do something very similar. I could just duplicate all this stuff, and in fact, that would be quicker, but I'm just going to build it first, okay? So if we go to the variables, you'll notice I can't set and get all these like global times and stuff until I initialize a new variable with this thing called like time or time left or something. So before I can do anything, I've got to go to my variables and I need to initialize a new variable. And I'm just going to call it time left. You can call it whatever you want, but something along those lines should probably be what you should do. So I'm going to make a new one called time left, and then we always need to set it to a number to start at. If this is my timer, I probably want to start my game with about 10 seconds, something like that. So now we've got this timer variable set up. So what I'm going to do is, again, I need to kind of copy this type of code that you did for score, but in the case of a timer. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to set my global time left variable to get the time left -1, because I want it to count down by 1 every time. So again, if you remember, we went into the math drawer, we got one of these, well in this case I need to get one of these -1s instead of the plus. So I'm going to grab one of these -1s, and then I'm going to, I could go back into variables, I'll delete that real quick. So variables, I need to get my global time left, and I need to subtract 1 from it now, because when my game starts, it starts at 10, and I need it to count down by 1 instead of adding like the scorer has to do. And then this isn't quite done, because if I just have the variable running, it's doing it in the background. I need to actually update the text on my screen to show my time as well. So I need to go down to my timer label. So before you went to the score label, that shows the thing on the screen. I need to go to my timer label. So I need to scroll down and find the one that says set the timer label text. So again, if I look back at my designer, that's the timer label is this thing up here. That text says timer and then my number, just like my score label has a number here. So basically we're setting it to update this number as the timer clicks down and show up on the screen. So I need to update my timer label text, and we're going to kind of duplicate this up here. So we've got this text option, and we need to join these two things together. So I'm going to go to my text, I'm going to hit this join thing, and then we need to, again, add what we want it to put together. So in this case, we're going to say time colon, and then we need to go get that number that's counting down here every second. So it's going to say, it's going to update the text on my screen and say time, and then it's going to join this number with it. So I'm going to go back to my variables. I'm going to get my global time left. So this is now counting down from 1 and updating my screen text to whatever that number now is. Okay? So we're not quite done. There's still a bunch of stuff that needs to happen. So if you think about the game, start to think about the what ifs, or what if something happens. So if my score is going to hit 0, that's when I get a game over. So if I am thinking in terms of like if, then, else, stuff like that, we are going to go under the orange or yellow, I guess, control tab, and we're going to grab out one of these if-then statements, okay? Because we need to make some kind of code that says, if my time counts all the way down to 0, something happens. A couple things should happen, really. So we are going to do another math block, and we're going to take this one, so like the one that has an equal sign in the middle. So if something equals something, right? So what should happen here? We need to consider what happens when our time left, so our get global time left variable, equals 0, meaning it's counted down all the way to 0 and the game's over. So if the game is over, a couple things need to happen. The first thing is we should probably turn the timer off, okay? So if you remember, I think there might have been one for like, well, I guess we don't have it on here. Oh, well, I guess over here, like, it told you at one point to like set clock 1 timer enabled to false, for example, when the germ hit the bottom. We're going to do the same thing over here. Basically, it's going to disable the clock from even working. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our clock variable down here, and we are going to go down here, and we're going to say, if the timer hits 0, we're going to grab out one of these set clock timer enabled blocks, and then we are going to turn this to false. So back under my logic, my light green up here, I'm going to grab one of these false blocks. This says when timer hits 0, I'm going to turn off the clock, or turn it false basically, so it's not on. The other thing is we got to consider, you know, when the timer hits 0 and we haven't let that little germ cross to the bottom, that technically means that we win. We've blocked it enough times and we've run out the clock and not let it cross by. So let's go ahead and make the background change. Kind of the same way that before, like if the germ hit the bottom of the screen, or that -1 edge down there, it set the background to game over. Well, we also have one, if you remember, if I were to scroll down on my screen, remember there's a game over screen, but there's also a you win screen. So let's make it so that if the timer hits 0, it's going to change the background to you win. So we're going to do the same kind of thing right here. We are going to go to the canvas, which is the background basically, and we're going to say set the canvas background image to, and again, we need to type in exactly what it shows down here, like capitals and like the file extensions like PNG, exactly like that. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to grab a text box and go to the top. I'm going to drag that in, and then I need to type exactly what the file name that I want it to display is. So I'm going to type in uwin.png. And that will make it so when the time hits 0, it sets the background image to that uwin image, okay? We should probably also, when we win here, turn off like the bad guy image, so the little germ sprite goes away. So similarly, let's just do kind of the same thing. We're going to go to the germ sprite, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to say, let's see, where is it? Right here. Set germ sprite enabled to false. Basically, we're disabling that germ sprite from showing up. It turns him off, so he's not showing up on the screen anymore. Okay. Another thing that should happen, kind of the same way that this is over here. So if you look at your germ sprite edge reached thing, you've got this kind of if then that's nestled within another if then. So it's asking if that sound box is checked on, then it's going to play a certain noise. So if we think about that, when we win, we want it to display or play another noise. So we're going to do kind of the same thing. Let's add another one of these if-thens within this block. Because again, if the time hits 0, and if again that sound is on, we're going to play a noise. So down here, again, if we kind of compare to what we've already done with this other part, we're going to look for the sound checkbox to be turned on. So sound checkbox, we need to make sure is enabled. So right here. So if the sound checkbox is checked, then we need to set the sound. So we're going to set the sound source and pick another one of these little text boxes. And again, instead of lose.wave, we need it to play, and again, you can check to make sure, but it's down here, win.wave. So we're going to type that in, win.wav. Okay? And again, it's not going to play that noise yet. We're just set what that noise is going to play. So we still need to go back to the sound. So we're going to call sound 1 to play now. So it sets the noise to play, win, and then it calls it to actually play. We are so close to being done. We only have one more little block. Basically, this is mostly working, but I like to do one other thing. So if you click this little blue gear option right here, I want you to add an else. So I'm going to drag this else right into this part right here. So basically this is saying if the timer it hits 0, it does this. Otherwise, if it's not at 0 yet, we still want that clock to be like on and counting down. Okay? So we're going to have an else right here so that if I go back and go to my clock 1, scroll back down, and I just want to grab this little set clock enabled, and we're going to make it true instead of false. Basically, this just makes sure that my clock is on and like true and working as long as I'm not at 0 yet. If I hit 0, it does this. Otherwise, if it's 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, it's still on and working. Okay? So that's pretty much the entire timer. You should still probably go back and like add a couple little things. Just for example, like when I hit the reset button, you should probably make it so that you set your global time left back to 10 and then update that like timer text. So again, this is probably what the last step would be to make sure that reset will actually get you back to the beginning with your score and your time back to 10. But other than that, if I scroll out, I think that's about it for my timer. So with this, you should be able to make sure that your score works, your noises work, and finally your timer works. Everything else in here, your score, your bouncing, your reset, that stuff is on PLTW. But this part, it's kind of assuming that you can take some of the stuff that you've learned from the other blocks, like updating your variables and updating the text, or this kind of like if-then statement stuff, like over here, and applying all that to figure out the timer. So this is kind of an important little thing that hopefully you guys can work through. And again, I showed you how to do it, but I really think it's important that you kind of break it down and almost read it out loud and make sure you understand why it works, okay? Because eventually you're going to have to make stuff on your own, and understanding the why of everything is really important, okay? So make sure you take some time to look at this code and kind of break it down and understand each little part and why it does what it does. Other than that, this will be due officially on Thursday. There's not going to be a work time, so please make sure that your app is ready to go and you've run this code before you turn it in, okay? Oh, one last thing, sorry. Make sure that you, for today's flex day, that you just use your snipping tool and you take a picture of what you just did. I want to see like proof that you put in the code. So again, just use the snipping tool, take a picture that shows that you've done this clock timer stuff, and submit this, save image, and then turn in that JPEG to Canvas. Okay, that'll prove that you did this, and hopefully you have everything else kind of working in conjunction so that you can show us the final app on Thursday. All right, have a good day.